Winter is closing in and Russian strikes have knocked out the power, keeping millions of Ukrainians warm.
It's been 9 months since Russia invaded, and now the Ukrainian government is asking its citizens to hold on until spring.
This rocket is the first of this war to hit a NATO country.
We've been crystal clear that we will defend every inch of NATO territory.
It is time to recognize the Russian Federation for what it is: a menace, a rogue state, and a state sponsor of terrorism.
President Vladimir Zelensky said he believes the Kremlin is laying the groundwork for a possible nuclear attack.
They begin to prepare their society. That is very dangerous.
It is brutally cold, but the bitter reality of this war has never escaped Ukrainians, even if the global fatigue has started to set in.
Well, Mick Ryan is a retired Australian Major General and former commander of the Australia Defence College.
He has led tours in Afghanistan and this year met President Zelensky inside Ukraine. I began by asking him whether he thinks Vladimir Putin is bogged down in a war that he thought would be a quick tactical win.
No, it hasn't, but he's managed to draw it out for this long. And I think he will draw it out well into 2023. He's conducting a very vicious, quite repulsive campaign of bombing against the Ukrainian people, denying them power, water and heating. But at the same time, he's mobilised a large number of young Russian men to throw them at this conflict, just really to hold the line. He's not going to make any more gains in the coming couple of months, but he just wants to hold the line until the spring of next year.
And what does that massive mobilisation tell us about the state of this conflict and the state of the Russian military at the moment?
Well, both sides have actually been mobilising. I mean, the Ukrainians mobilised very early. They denied permission for young men to actually leave the country, and they've mobilised probably 700,000 young Ukrainian men and women, and some not so young, to be part of their military and civil defence organisation. They've done that pretty effectively so far. The Russians have gone through a first round of mobilisation of about 300,000. That has had varying results. They're about to start probably a second round. And for them, this is about replacing the huge number of combat and non-combat losses over the last 9 months. And then hopefully, from the Russian perspective, building the forces that will allow them to go on the offensive in 2023 to secure these provinces that Vladimir Putin annexed in September.
I want to talk to you just very quickly about these mobilisations that we're seeing. It looks like that is a political risk domestically for Vladimir Putin, but it's one that he's willing to take?
Well, he's certainly willing to take now, because if he doesn't succeed here, his very regime will be threatened or worse. So, he sees no other option. He procrastinated on this decision for a very long time. If he had mobilised in April, we might be fighting a different war now. But he waited a very long time to make this decision because of the domestic risk, and he only made it because he had no other option.
And Mick, on the Ukrainian side, we have seen this extraordinary resistance. What did you see and feel when you visited Ukraine recently?
Oh, you can sense that there's a whole feeling, not just of national unity, but absolute determination to see this through to the end. I mean, this is not the first time the Ukrainian people have been persecuted by the Russians. There was a tremendous and awful famine earlier in their history. So there's a long history of the Ukrainians standing up to the Russians. They're going to see this through. The president in particular is a very impressive, courageous and inspirational leader, and he's leading his people to what we hope will be a victory at some point in the coming year or two.
Well, they have been making sweeping gains recently, but winter is approaching. What do you think that is going to mean for the conflict?
Well, it'll slow it down. It won't stop it. No war stops for winter. But it will change the pace at which the Russians and the Ukrainians can fight, the pace at which they can supply their forces, the amount of sorties they might be able to generate from their air forces and from their drones. I don't think it's going to slow down the Russian strategic strikes against Ukrainian infrastructure, and we're probably going to see the Ukrainians attempt at least some small-scale offensives to keep chipping away at Russian-held territory within Ukraine.
Yeah, well, we've been reminded recently of the devastation that Russia can inflict on Ukraine with those drone and missile attacks. How close do you think that Vladimir Putin is to using a nuclear weapon?
I think we're a very long way from that. Even Putin, as disgraceful as his actions have been, understands that it would fundamentally change the nature, not just of this war, but of NATO's participation. It would be almost impossible for NATO to stand by if Russia was to use a nuclear weapon here. And Putin can't overcome Ukraine. NATO is a far larger and far more formidable threat to him. So I think it's very unlikely that he'll be using nuclear weapons in the short term. That doesn't entirely take them off the table, but this is a very low probability event.
Yeah, absolutely, Mick. And it wouldn't actually change the course of the conflict significantly. It wouldn't end the war, would it? It would be a massive escalation.
It would be a significant escalation, and to have a significant tactical impact on Ukraine's military, he would have to use more than one. He would probably have to use several. So I think this is very low probability, just because tactically it wouldn't have a major impact, but strategically it would change the game for Russia and probably several generations of Russians into the future.
Absolutely. So where are we heading, do you think, in this conflict? Do you think that a negotiated settlement is possible? Both sides seem very entrenched at the moment.
I don't see negotiations being productive at this point in time. I don't really see what the Ukrainians would be willing to negotiate at the moment. What would be on the table for them? They've said what they want. Zelensky's speech to the G20 outlined 10 aspects of war termination. I think they're worth reading by anyone who's proposing negotiations. And frankly, why shouldn't he want all the territory and all his citizens back in Ukraine?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we thank you so much for joining us here on The Nation this morning for your insight and your analysis, retired Major General Mick Ryan.
Thank you.